Well, student loan borrowers, this week it's time to pay the piper. The administration will begin collection on your defaulted student loan payments this week. And if that just snuck up on you, it's probably because you bought into the lie that Joe was going to forgive your debt and have someone else pay for it. You bought into that lie, and you also likely bought into the lie that employers would be banging down your door to pay you $500,000 a year right after your women's studies degree on year 5 at your expensive university. Yikes. Well, that one's on you. But on to more positive things. Turns out Gen Z isn't completely composed of whiny, entitled brats. There's actually a growing segment of that generation that has decided to take on a trade rather than a debt. Jobs and career paths that were once looked down upon are making a cultural comeback, and I love to see it. Who better to break it down than Mike Rowe Works Foundation CEO and people you should know storyteller, the one and only Mike Rowe. All right, Mike, I have so much to ask you about, but I got to start with the student loan thing because I'm pretty passionate about this. I don't think that we should be paying off people's debts just in general, but this week they're going to start the collection process. And a lot of these young people, they were sold this bill of goods. They go to a 4-year university. They're going to make all this money. They're going to get all the paid time off they want. Life is going to be a cakewalk. And now the bills are coming due. What advice would you give those folks?
Pay them. Pay your bills. I'm sorry you were sold a bill of goods. You also bought a bill of goods. I'm not unsympathetic, honestly. You know, the snowflake crowd is an easy target. But as I've said before, we are the clouds from which the snowflakes fell. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense to completely demonize them. What I've been doing for the last 17 years is reaching out to kids who are in the midst of trying to make that decision and just say, look, I don't know what the best path is for you, but I do know that right now there's 7.6 million open jobs out there that don't require a 4-year degree. And many of those jobs are 6-figure jobs or provide a path to 6 figures. And that just simply means you don't start your career with a $100,000 millstone around your neck. And it's taken a while for that message to land because we're really like turning around a tanker, right? We just got it into our heads that the best path for the most people was the most expensive path. And if you didn't take that path, you were screwed. You're going to be stuck turning a wrench somewhere. Well, guess what? My foundation can tell you, no bones about it, that turning a wrench can make you 6 figures a year. I've got thousands of examples. So it's gratifying on a personal level to see the headlines catch up to my own smack, you know, and on a financial level, I got to tell you, you know, that I talk to plumbers and HVAC guys every single day, and nobody's ever talked about forgiving the loan on their F-350 or on the tools that they need to build the corner office or the place that, you know, the hotel I'm sitting in right now or the studio where you are. Nobody ever talks about that. And so, yeah, I'm relieved to see us get our thumb off that particular scale.
It's just amazing how much college tuition is these days. But by forgiving student loans, you're really incentivizing these universities to just keep jacking up the price because there's no reason they wouldn't. They don't have to be competitive, so they can just keep charging whatever they want. People will pay it because there has been, at least my millennial generation, there's been this stigma that if you don't go to college, that somehow you are a deadbeat. Oh, you don't go to college, it's the end all for you. Your parents are going to be so disappointed. You're not like your peers. That was the millennials. We felt that way. But now I give a lot of credit to some of the folks in Gen Z who are looking at college and they're thinking, you know what? I want to actually learn how to do something and something where I will always have a job. And I think that's a big thing too. Like if you learn a trade, you learn to become an HVAC worker, a plumber, an electrician, there's a pretty good chance you're always going to have a job and a high paying job. What would you say to those that are still kind of reticent because they don't want to be looked down upon? They want to have this 4-year degree like all of their friends.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the end, the enemy is cookie cutter advice. The enemy to education is a one size fits all belief. I don't really know who's listening or watching this right now. And to be fair, I think some people probably would be better served if they can afford it to go the 4-year route. I don't know. I just know that the gap that exists today is not a result of too many people not pursuing a trade. It's it's the result of too many people with 4-year degrees who aren't trained for any of the opportunities that currently exist. In other words, we're not suffering from a lack of college grads. We are suffering as a country from a lack of people who are willing to learn a skill that's in demand. And look, I'm not an alarmist, but if I were, this would be the time I'd be screaming it from the mountaintop. I hear every week from big companies who are desperate to find people who are willing to learn a skill. The maritime industrial base right now is hiring 140,000 people, trying to help build the next generation of nuclear powered submarines for the US Navy. This is a monumental number. And they literally called me last week to say, can you help us? Do you know where these people are? And I said, yeah, man, I know where they are. They're in the 8th grade. You've got to start now. You've got to make a more persuasive case for these jobs now. But as far as Gen Z goes, you're right. A lot of them got the memo. They did the math. They're looking around and they're coming to the obvious conclusion that the shortest distance between the opportunities that are currently out there is mastering a skill. So, one other thing. When I was in school, I got a 4-year degree, right? 1984 cost me 12 grand. Today, the same thing costs 100 grand. But now, everything I learned, every single thing is available if I have an internet connection for free. I literally lay in my hotel bed early this morning watching a lecture from MIT for free. Like, you can do that. You can have, if you have a sense of curiosity, you can get a liberal arts education or something pretty close to it for a whole lot less. And you can still learn how to do something useful. That's my advice to them.
Exactly. A couple cultural touch points here. Mike, I don't know. You don't strike me as the kind of guy that watches Bravo or watches The Real Housewives. I don't know. I don't want to judge. You never know how people identify these days. I, for one, though, Mike, I watch a lot of Bravo and I watch a lot of Real Housewives. And I thought there was something important. Stick with me here. I was watching The Real Housewives of Atlanta, and one of the housewives has a big, beautiful house. In fact, she's got a nicer house than anybody on that show has. And when they asked her, how did you make this money? Well, she does dances, sings, whatever. Well, what does your husband do? Well, guess what? He owns an HVAC company. So
Damn
I
right.
thought that was important because for those that are watching The Real Housewives and all this, they're seeing this big, beautiful mansion. She's driving a Rolls, all this. They've got so much money, and they don't work as a CEO, a doctor, a lawyer, a plastic surgeon. He owns an HVAC company. So I'm thinking, where's the justice for the HVAC workers out there? Maybe some of these moments now, I think culture's changing and people are realizing there's a lot of money, not only in doing those jobs, but owning those companies. What have you seen just in your long career in this? People that start out maybe as an apprentice, people that start out lower, and then they end up owning the dang company. Where are those people at now?
Well, that story has always been for sale and it's always been out there. The question is, how is it celebrated and to what degree is it ignored? The reason most people today, if they close their eyes and I say plumber, the reason they picture a 300-pound dude with a giant butt crack is because that's how they've seen the plumber portrayed in countless sitcoms and movies for time immemorial. And it's the same thing of really any contractor, an electrician, a steam fitter, a pipe fitter, HVAC, right? All of those jobs were relegated socially into a kind of vocational consolation prize. Those were the jobs that the people did who weren't cut out for the 4-year degree, right? And that's the belief. That's the underlying default belief that informs a lot of unfair portrayals and inaccurate portrayals. Kudos to Vanderpump Rules or the Real Housewives or whatever's going on for showing a successful entrepreneur who's killing it as a result of learning a skill. And I also think, I don't say it lightly, but I think it's great to have a family, a husband and a wife, one in sort of a blue collar space and the other in another space. That didn't used to be weird or rare, but we're so codified today and everybody's so in their same column today that you don't have any blue collar work represented in white collar households and vice versa, and that's part of why this giant gap has evolved. We gravitate to same, we look for people in our own professions. We look for things we're familiar with. It didn't used to be that way, and it is today, and that's part of what's going on in the country, I think. Don't know how to fix that one. Way out of my pay grade.
Well, there's a lot of job security and knowing how to actually do something. I'll tell you what, when something goes wrong in my house, the first person I'm calling is someone who knows how to fix something, which is actually another point that I was anxious to ask you about beyond the whole career path and how you make your money. I have a fear sitting here in 2025, and maybe it's getting better, I don't know. But I'll tell you this. When something goes wrong for me and for my whole life since I moved out at 18, if something goes wrong in my house, my apartment, my dorm, whatever, I call my dad and he can pretty much tell me how to fix it, or he can direct me to the person I need to call to fix that thing. A lot of times, though, he can tell me how to do it and I can figure it out. I worry that future generations, maybe the generations we have now, they're not going to be able to call their dads to tell them how to fix things because dad's a podcaster or a TikToker. And I worry about that. I worry that young men and young women are not being taught the skills that for past generations, my parents' generation, you just grew up learning how to do these things. It was natural. And I'm worried people are not going to be able to call their dad anymore because dad isn't going to know either.
No, look, I think it's legit because I don't think ultimately there's a real good substitute for the apprentice model. In the world of the skilled trades, you just can't beat it. It's hands-on, it's face-to-face instruction. That's really how you learn. But again, just to be fair about it, while it's true that lecture I watched at MIT from my hotel bed is not the same as sitting in the classroom, it's a decent substitute. And so who knows, if you can't call your dad or your granddad for advice or a super handy uncle, you can go on YouTube right now and you can say how to replace a washer, how to replace my toilet. And the tutorials are there. Are they the same? Are they as effective? Probably not, but it's something. So I don't know how it ends, Tammy, honestly, but I think that being connected to people who have solutions to problems is really important. I wrote a book years ago called Profoundly Disconnected about me. I grew up with a front row seat to farmers and fishermen and people in the trades. But by the time I was 40, I'd had 20 years in Hollywood, and I was no longer blown away by the miracle of the lights coming on when I flicked the switch or the crap going away when I flushed the toilet. It was like, I get used to it. You can take anything for granted, including HVAC and electricity and so forth. So part of what I try to do at Mike Rowe Works is provide scholarships for people who want to learn these skills. And by the way, there's $3 million sitting there right now this month for anybody who wants to learn a skill that's in demand. But the other part is like your Real Housewives story. It's finding better ways to portray the people in the trades. And it's working with companies to debunk some of the social stereotypes that surround these jobs. It's important.
I find when I talk to people that have some level of wealth and I ask them what they do for a living, the great majority, at least here in Tennessee, they own a company and usually that company builds something.
Bet. Yep.
You don't meet a lot of people that you meet the doctors and the lawyers. Of course, there is that. But at least here in Tennessee and where I grew up in South Dakota, people that had a lot of money, they had successful ranches or farms, or they built something, or they owned something that built something. It's building things. With this whole tariff situation, a lot of people are very nervous. They like the idea of American jobs coming back, manufacturing and the like, but they're worried because they're really used to getting their stuff from Temu and Shein from China, and they're not quite convinced that this whole tariff thing and bringing jobs back is going to work. What's your level of optimism that Trump's experiment might pan out?
Well, look, obviously, I'm not an economist. In fact, I don't know any economists who support tariffs in general. But look, I think there's a tier one conversation and a tier two conversation. If you're really talking about the economy and what's best for the short-term needs of the average American consumer vis-a-vis the economy, and by the way, the average American investor, It hasn't been fun watching my 401k and my stock portfolio take it in the neck as a result of these things. I get all that. But there's another conversation. And to me, it's not so different than the conversation the country was having in 1870, when a lot of smart people were saying, look, you can't get rid of slavery. You can't do it. It'll break the economy's back. And if you're not careful, there's liable to be a civil war. We're just going to have to live with it. Well, you know what? Getting rid of slavery was not an economic decision. It was a decision rooted in something else. And when I look at China personally, when I look at the Uyghur situation, when I look at the fact that last year 100,000 organs were harvested from prisoners, when I look at hospitals being built next to prisons in China and read about Americans scheduling a heart transplant or a liver transplant and flying over there to get it done, or literally buying the organs from political prisoners. I mean, it's so like, do you really want to be in business with these cats? Do you really want to rely to that degree on a country who's so diametrically opposed on so many civil rights issues to get you your stuff, whether it's your medical stuff or your toys or anything in between? I think the reason so many people are talking past each other with tariffs is that one group of people is only focused on the economic impact, both short and midterm. And then there's a group of other people who are going, who the hell are we, man? Do we want to make our things? Can we look beyond the cost of a thing? Can we look beyond the value of our 401ks for a while to try and hit a reset button and reaffirm what it means to be self-reliant as a country? I don't know. Just depends on how you want to set the table, I guess, as to how the conversation evolves.
Well, Mike, they say the same thing about the illegal alien cheap labor. They say if we don't have illegal alien cheap labor, everything is going to be more expensive. We must have cheap illegal alien labor. And, to the point about China, it's kind of a similar thing. Well, if we don't have these people who are willing to work for much less than we are, then how can our economy thrive? What do you say to those people?
I say the ultimate cheap illegal alien labor was the slave population that we relied on for a long, long time. What they're talking about is just a cut above it. But look, my personal feeling, and again, I'm way outside my lane here, but I just believe you need to look at a thing square in the face if you're going to have an opinion on it. I mean, if you're going to eat meat, go to a slaughterhouse, hunt, look at it, understand what it is, and then make your decision. If you're going to support slavery, then whatever. But I mean, when I think about people wearing clothes made from cotton picked by slaves who are righteously denouncing the institution, right? It's like, well, you fill in the blank. Capital punishment, witness one. Abortion, witness one. Right? So if you want to do business with China, take your head out of the sand and look real hard at who they are and what they're doing with IP, and then if you still want to do it, okay, at least you're informed and now we know where you stand. But I just think the vast majority of Americans don't want to look at a thing squarely in the face for what it is. But at the same time, they want to have an opinion, and then they want to share it real loud, and then they want to write about it, and then they want to sound super certain. They're not looking at
They also want to claim that they're the ones with the moral high ground, which I find really interesting. I want to talk about women in some of these jobs as well. A lot of men do the manual labor jobs. Maybe that's by design. I don't know. But from what I've seen, from what you inspire through your various programs, is that there are a lot of young women who are learning how to weld and learning how to do things, and they're very successful at it, and they're very good at it. What do you tell the young ladies out there that might be looking at a trade job and they're worried that it's going to make them seem masculine or something like that?
I'd say your ego's in the way of the rest of your life. I'd say look at the numbers. 30% of the people my foundation has helped in what many people think is like a 100% male-dominated vertical are women. One of the rock stars of Mike Rowe Works is a woman named Chloe Hudson, who came very close to borrowing $300,000 to be a plastic surgeon, but decided at the last minute she wanted to weld. I gave her 6 grand 7 years ago, or maybe less. I'm not even sure. All I know is today she makes 150 grand a year. She doesn't have any debt. She's a rock star at Joe Gibbs Aerospace. I mean, I've got story after story after story. And anybody who wants to honestly educate themselves can go to my foundation and scroll down and see the stories. The evidence demands a verdict. You know, all we can do is lead the horse to water. I can't make him drink, but I can show you. I can show you the truth of what's out there. And if you're a female who wants to learn a skill, look, we help everybody from truckers to cosmetologists to welders to steamfitters, anything that doesn't require a 4-year degree. That's where the opportunities are today.
You're right about cosmetology too. There's a lot of people that go into whether it's aesthetics, doing fillers and injections, or doing hair or nails or what have you, that are making great money. And again, back to the cultural point, they're doing very well marketing that on social media, and that's become very cool on the TikTok, on the Instagram, all of that. So I'm happy to see the resurgence. Beyond what you do at Mike Rowe Works, you also have a new docuseries on YouTube, People You Should Know, which I saw a clip of this morning on America Reports that was fantastic. But for those who didn't see it, what is this series about, and who and how did you find these people?
Well, full disclosure, it is a continuation of a project that I started 5 years ago with Facebook called Returning the Favor, where we would just try and elevate these bloody do-gooders, right? These neighbors that you wish you had who are doing something selfless in their own communities. So we show up, we find these people, we tell them we're making a documentary about their life, or not their life, about the organization or the problem that they're dealing with. Could be foster care, could be immigration, could be PTSD. And then we surprise them with a very elaborate gift that allows them to do more of what they were already doing. The town comes out, there's a parade, people cry. You know, it's a feel-good show, but it's also the making of a feel-good show. Anyway, when it was called Returning the Favor, you know, we made 100 episodes. I won an Emmy for the damn thing. And it was downloaded 450 million times. And Facebook canceled it because they moved on from their watch program and decided they didn't want to compete with Netflix. So I had 2 million people who were watching this thing every week lose their minds and say, when are you going to bring it back? And so it took me a while, but I decided to do 6 on my own. The first episode is up right now on my YouTube page. It's The Real Mike Rowe, or just Google People You Should Know Mike Rowe. And it really is such a simple concept. It's my little crew goes out, we surprise these people, and some of them, Tammy, I swear to God, what they're doing is incredible. This guy in Fredericksburg, Steve Hotz, runs the Black Horse Forge. He broke his back. He was a paratrooper, lost an eye, damn near punched his own ticket, like so many guys who wrestle with PTSD, and learned that forging was so therapeutic, it literally saved his life. And so he decided to open his forge to other vets who were struggling in the same way. 22,000 vets have gone through the Black Horse Forge with 0 suicides.
Wow.
It's a giant story. Nobody's telling it. And this little project gives me a chance to do that. So, yeah, that's what I'm up to. We shot 6. I'll do 60 more if the audience says they want them, and I'm hoping they do.
It also gives people a renewed faith in humankind, which at some point we need. My last question for you, because I was thinking of this as you were saying, you know, about telling the stories of people and highlighting this. So back to my reality TV thing again. Have you ever thought, and I'm going to give you this idea because I think it would be blockbuster. Have you ever thought of uniting with Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie from A Simple Life and doing some kind of collaboration there, because you guys could do a lot for the working man and woman?
Like, I'll talk to anybody. I'd never say no to anything. I do remember A Simple Life came out when Dirty Jobs was at its height. And of course, the biggest difference is who and where is the punchline, right? Like on Dirty Jobs, it was very important that if there was a joke, it was on me. It was never at the expense of the people we were profiling. And I've looked at a lot of shows. 39 shows came out of Dirty Jobs. Swamp People and Axemen, and you can go down the list. And I don't want the credit or the blame for any of them. But the thing that we did different on that show would be the thing that I would insist any new project do. And that is tell the truth. Keep the camera wide, rely on the behind the scenes camera to show the viewer the making of the show. Be remorselessly authentic about it, and never make fun, never poke fun at a man or a woman who makes a living working with their hands. If Paris Hilton wants to do that, or that Vanderpump lady, or any of those Real Housewives, yeah, bring them on. I'll talk to anybody.
I would love to see that collaboration. I think it would be huge for the reality community and for the working community. But thank you for all that you do. I mean, I can't think of a person that's done more to elevate the working man and woman and tell their stories like you have over many, many, many years, and you do it best. So thank you so much. Congratulations on the new docuseries on YouTube, and thank you for all you do.
Well, thanks for being fearless. Again, $3 million, microworks.org. If you want to apply for a work ethic scholarship, go get some.
There for the taking. Thanks so much, Mike.
Welcome.
Folks, that does it for this special, dirty, well-paying, worth something jobs episode. I will catch you right back here Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless from Nashville. God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.